How do you imagine this scene, this mountainside where Jesus goes up and these thousands of people follow him, and there they all are? How do you imagine that? What do you see on people's faces when you picture that scene? I can't get around the movie scenes of the scene personally, where everyone is sort of happily middle class in a 2,000-year-old way, right? And monochromatic largely, and very just easygoing about things. I don't think that's probably what it was, though. So try to imagine really what that might have looked like. Less monochromatic, less middle class, more of sort of probably people that you and I would say are the riffraff. We probably look around and go, I'm not going to sit over there. I don't think I feel comfortable over there. I'm not sure I'm going to go over there either. Oh, there are some people I might sit with. That's how it might feel to be on that mountainside, I think. Like a lot of crowds, it would feel uncomfortable, a little edgy. And so then, I don't know about you, have you ever tried to imagine Philip in this story? Now Jesus, I get Jesus is sort of calm about this, right? And John says he already knows what's going to happen. He knows how the story goes, Jesus does, because that's Jesus, especially in John's gospel. He looks at Philip and he says, how are we going to feed these people? Now try to imagine what Philip is feeling. So easygoing, no problem. I trust you, Jesus. No, I think Philip is sitting there going, are you kidding me? Feed them? This was not on the agenda, Jesus. We didn't hire a caterer. We didn't plan a budget. We don't have any way to feed thousands of people. He's stressed. He's anxious. He's confused probably in this moment. Except that Jesus isn't. And so somewhere in the middle of this, a little boy has 5 loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many? And yet look what happens in this story, right? Everyone is fed, there's food left over, and everyone is part of this inbreaking of this loving presence of God in Jesus. It's quite an amazing story. And it should teach us something about discipleship and about what it means to be the church, what it means to be beloved community, this group of people who are trying, sometimes imperfectly, but trying to live out and embody in everything we do and say that unending love of God. Because we're supposed to be like Philip and these other disciples. And yet too often, I think, Christians, people who call themselves Christians, we included probably at times, I don't like pointing fingers at anyone but me, just so you know, we're more inclined to control than to feed. We're more inclined to need to change people than to love people. And yet that's not our call in any way, shape, or form. I think there are 3 things that are going on in this story that are worth paying attention to. There are probably more, but here are my 3. The first one is curiosity. There is an anticipation that something we're going to see and experience and learn something new all the time. Jesus starts the curiosity. Hey, Philip, how are we going to feed these people? And after Philip takes a few breaths, I think he kind of goes, well, I'm kind of curious too what's going to happen here. And it seems as though the disciples go with that, not always easily, but they go with that sense of, well, there are 5 loaves and 2 fish, and maybe something will happen here. So curiosity should always be something that we cultivate. Because for you and me, it is so important. There is always something new to experience, discover, learn about what it means to be beloved community. There's always something new. We never have it all figured out. So we cultivate that. The second piece of this that is so beautiful, right, is generosity. Here's this little boy. He has 5 loaves and 2 fish. That could be his family's food for a week. But we give it because we're all in this together somehow. And somehow these 5 loaves and these 2 fish feed everyone. And I suspect as this went on, it wasn't just the boys' generosity. I imagine there are others who would have passed that loaf and said, will anyone notice if I just put the rest of this in my pocket here, because I may still be hungry in an hour. But everyone kept giving and giving and giving. And even the ones who would have been selfish and needing to sort of make sure they got their fair share, it seems like, started giving as well. And look what happens when we do that. You and I need to always start in whatever interaction we're in with a sense of generosity, a sense that we have something to offer that can share that love of God. The third thing that I think is interesting in this story, and I'm using the word advisedly, mostly because it rhymes, but I think it's true too, is, right, Haley, because I do this, right? Haley's not surprised. I do this all the time. But see, you'll remember them. You'll go home and you'll go like, okay, generosity, or curiosity, generosity, and serenity. I use the word advisedly because I'm watching Philip in this, and I'm like, if you looked at Philip right after Jesus asked that question, I can't imagine Philip looked very serene as we imagine serenity, right? He's not in this beatific halo around his head, sort of saintly place. Oh, Jesus, you're so wonderful. I put my whole trust in you. I don't think that's where Philip was. I'm certain that's not where I would be and where I have been when Jesus has asked me those kinds of questions. But I don't think serenity is that peaceful, calm, necessarily thing. When I think of serenity, I think of do you all know the Serenity prayer? Have you heard this prayer? Help me out, folks who know this prayer better than I do. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Let me tell you about something about serenity in that prayer. That ain't easy, right? That takes strength, courage, and a bordering on desperate recognition that it is only God who gives us that. Spend time with anyone who probably to save their life prays that prayer on a daily basis because they're in recovery and trying to get sober, trying to get their life back together. And you will see what serenity really is. It ain't easy. It requires God's help. And it's of way greater value than that Eagles song, Peaceful, Easy Feeling. That's the Eagles, right? Peaceful, Easy Feeling. Do I have that right? Someone who knows? Thank you. I think it's the Eagles. You know the one I'm talking about. This is way deeper than that, right? This is something way more. And frankly, we could all stand to pray that prayer, not in a trite Hallmark card kind of way, but in the deep grit of the struggle of life way that people who are getting sober pray it all the time. Curiosity, generosity, serenity are the things that we can cultivate that can make space for miracles to happen. So today, in just a minute, we're going to receive Eteri Shaknashvili, right? Did I get that right? Close enough, Eteri? Into the Episcopal Church. For those of you who don't know, in the convocation here, I hope you weren't, were you going to explain all this, Bishop? I'm going for it. Is that all right? It's time. For those of you who don't know, in the Convocation of Episcopal Churches in Europe, we have a congregation in Tbilisi, Georgia. How cool is that? And this congregation, in looking for the person who has been leading that congregation, has been their pastoral leader, is now heading off to seminary at Virginia Seminary to, God willing, get ordained a priest in the Episcopal Church. How cool is that? And so that congregation looked and prayed and discerned good curiosity, generosity, serenity, and they said, Eteri is the one we believe God is raising up to lead this congregation. Does Eteri have these amazing skills and experience and all that, it might be easy to think, like all of us should when we have a sense of call, I don't have enough to do this. We don't. Just like the disciples in the story. Do they have enough to do this, to feed 5,000? No. Is that okay? Yep, it is. Because Terry's not doing this alone. Terry's doing this by God's grace, in God's love, with God's gifts. And there's no end to what can happen when we do that, right? So we're going to receive Terry into the Episcopal Church today and send her on our way with our love and prayers and encouragement to faithfully lead this congregation in St. Nino's in Tbilisi, Georgia. How cool is that? This is the kind of stuff God does. This is, we should be surprised, but then we should say, I'm surprised, but I shouldn't be. This is what God does. This is how it goes when we become beloved community, when we live into that as fully as we can. This is what happens. So today, where you are, off to see Olympic events, or just to enjoy the sunshine, Lord knows we need the sunshine, or whatever it is, where for you is the rub, the challenge, the call to more deeply cultivate curiosity, generosity, and or serenity? They're good things for us to cultivate. God's grace can grow those in us, such that we can be like Philip, like this little boy, like all these people in this story who shared in and encountered the miraculous love of God that day. That will continue here in this place at St. Nino's in Tbilisi, Georgia, and all those places we all come from normally. So those are the things today. I love that they rhyme. You know this. Curiosity, generosity, and serenity.